Harry shook his head. "You came," he whispered. "You really came." Her arms tightened, and Harry bit back a wince. "Of course I came when I heard you pray that desperately," she said. "I'm glad you did. I prayed to Artie too, but she didn't come." Harry whispered, afraid that she'd take it badly that he tried a different goddess as well. "You prayed to Artie and she ignored you?" Hestia asked, her voice suddenly taking on a dangerous undertone. There seemed to be whispers from the other voices, but they stopped suddenly. He imagined Hestia had glared at them. Harry just nodded. "That's not very nice of her," Hestia said, her voice somewhat tight. "Did I do wrong? I prayed to you but then I remembered you were in California and thought you couldn't hear me, so I tried praying to Artie but she ignored me." He managed to get out in a single breath. "No, Harry, no, you did nothing wrong. You didn't know I could hear you, and you were afraid for your life," Hestia reassured him, but the last part was said rather angrily. He tried to move but his side flared in pain. "Harry, are you in pain?" "My side," he whispered. "One of the soldiers hit me." Her hand reached for his side and a pleasant warmth spread through his body. The pain lessened. He heard Hestia take a deep breath. "I can heal minor wounds as goddess of the home," she said, "but you have 2 broken ribs. I'll ask someone to." Harry whimpered and tried to curl deeper into her embrace. "Don't worry," she said with a teasing tone. "Apollo is many things, but he is an excellent healer." She leaned closer. "He is the god of healing, after all," she said. Harry just nodded. "Apollo, if you would?" she asked. "Of course, Aunt Hestia," one of the other voices said. There were some grumbles. "I believe I asked for you to remain quiet," Hestia said on a gentle tone with a steel undercurrent. Harry thought she sounded awesome. Hestia could quiet this bundle of angry people with just her voice. Awesome was the most appropriate word. "Hey there, kiddo," the masculine voice said, sounding very close. "Don't worry, I'll have you fixed up in no time." Harry risked a look. The man was blonde, has blue eyes, and looked nice. Harry supposed he looked like a god one could ask for a favor, a god who wouldn't hurt people not unless they deserved it. At least, the man, Apollo, Harry corrected, put a hand on his hurting side. "Ouch, that looks painful, kiddo. Let the handsome god of the sun heal you up," the god said. Harry felt his side relax. "There you go, as good as new." Harry swallowed. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, not sure how to address the god that had healed him. He didn't recall if this particular god's voice had been one of the multitude that had been yelling and screaming earlier. Apollo smiled widely. "You're quite welcome. I'll be back on my throne for when you feel like coming out of Aunt Hestia's arms." He thought for a moment, and then grinned at Harry. "I know how difficult that is, so take your time," he teased. "Apollo," Hestia said, on a tone of long-suffering amusement. Harry risked a small smile. Yes, it was hard leaving a Hestia hug. Anyone who enjoyed those couldn't be all that bad. He decided. "Are you feeling better?" Hestia asked when she felt him relax. He just nodded. "Come," she said, patting his back. "I'll introduce you to the others." She leaned in closer. "Just remember to be polite, and everything will be all right." Harry squirmed deeper into her embrace. "They'll curse me, or kill me. That soldier said so, and when I tried to get free, he thumped me hard." Hestia tightened her hug slightly. "Nobody's going to curse you, or kill you, and if I find out which of the guards hit you, I will be having a quiet word with him about his behavior, about what is acceptable and what is not." There were quiet mutters from the other voices. Harry sighed. "Okay," he whispered. He didn't want to leave the quiet safety of Hestia's protective embrace. He didn't want to meet the sources of the angry voices. Angry voices reminded him of Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. She patted his back again. "I'll be right here with you," Hestia promised, as if she could read his mind. "You're under my protection. Nobody's going to hurt you." Harry looked up at her, and noticed that she was looking over his back at someone, as if she had directed the last part not at him, but at someone else. Was she warning someone? "Promise?" he asked, quietly. He was stalling for time. He knew it. Hestia's smile indicated that she knew it, too. I promise, she said, smiling gently at him. That smile more than anything reassured him. Hestia would protect him from the angry voices. Hestia wouldn't let anything happen to him. She was the best goddess ever, he decided. He sighed and moved slightly. She released him, and stood up. He swallowed once, and stood up as well. Come on, Harry, we'll begin with my youngest brother. Harry took his first good look around the large room he had been thrown into by the soldier. The sources of the angry voices became at once apparent, as the room held many large thrones occupied by many large people, and when Harry meant large, he meant large, as all these people were at least 3 meters tall. They all looked very different, and each had their own distinct form of throne. He noticed, he didn't want to look them in the eyes. He kept his head down. He wanted to be out of this awful room with these people that yelled and screamed. He wanted to go back to Helio's temple, where things were quiet. This is my youngest brother, Hestia said, stopping in front of one of the 2 thrones that stood at the head of the U-shaped room. Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, god of thunder. Zeus, this is Harry Potter. There came guffaws from the other gods, and the pretty lady sitting next to the king of the gods turned a deathly look at the god. Wow! Zeus managed before the words hit him. Suddenly, his hand was holding a lightning bolt of all things. Harry aped and tried to hide behind Hestia. You little urchin! He shouted, making Harry cringe. How dare you? The woman sitting next to Zeus heal you? Harry offered the tall man in his pinstripe suit a tentative smile. Hi Mr. Zeus, he tried, before recognizing the man. Suddenly, unstoppably, a memory came to him. Immediately he forgot about his fears as the memory assaulted him, and he pointed accusingly. You're the pervert who had his tongue down that woman's throat and his hands on her behind while her legs were locked around his sides. There came guffaws from the other gods, and the pretty lady sitting next to the king of the gods turned a deathly look at the god. Wow! Zeus managed before the words hit him. Suddenly, his hand was holding a lightning bolt of all things. Harry aped and tried to hide behind Hestia. You little urchin! He shouted, making Harry cringe. How dare you? The woman sitting next to Zeus coughed rather exaggerated manner. Zeus turned white. What is this I hear, dear husband? Hera asked, her tone completely at odds with her words. Hera. That is, I mean, Harry stepped out from behind Hestia, who gave him a small smile. That may not have been a good way to make Zeus like you, Harry, she offered. The boy nodded shyly. It was disgusting when I saw it, I just didn't know who it was. Zeus, meanwhile, tried to bluster his way out. I don't see why you're taking the boy's words as truth, he declared. Your initial reaction showed their truth, Hera answered with a withering look. Yeah, Harry shouted, suddenly feeling strengthened now that he had someone else defending him. He pointed at Zeus again and waggled his finger. You're only supposed to make kissy face with your wife. And why were you making kissy face with that other woman anyway? His finger moved to Hera. She's far prettier than that other woman was. More tittering and quiet guffaws from the other gods. Zeus blinked, not having expected a mortal boy, who until 10 minutes ago was cowering in fear, was now lecturing him. He narrowed his eyes and was about to lay into the boy again, when he noticed Hestia's tightening eyes. Thank you, Harry, Hera said, rather kindly, before turning to Zeus. Now you hear it from someone else, husband. We will discuss this again later. Zeus seemed to pale. Harry didn't know what Hera was going to do to her husband, but from his reaction, it looked awful. Hestia motioned for Hera. Harry, this is my youngest sister, Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, familial love, and women, and as you may have guessed by now, she's Zeus' wife. Hello Miss Hera, Harry said, suddenly feeling rather bad about having shouted about Zeus' affair where everyone could hear it. Hello, Harry, Hera said with a tight smile. Sorry about shouting about Mr. Zeus, Harry offered, hoping that Hera wouldn't be too mad at him. Hera glared at Zeus, before turning back to Harry. I wish I could say that this was the first time, she said. Zeus muttered something that Harry didn't catch. from the way Hestia's shoulders tensed. She had, though. Harry was about to turn to her and ask what Zeus had said, when Hera spoke up. "Why would I not be nice to him, husband?" she snapped. "He is one of the few proper demigods out there. He was conceived in wedlock, his parents loved him, and they loved each other. This I can tell from my own domain. Tell me then, why would I not treat him properly when his existence is, for once, not an affront to my domain?" Zeus seemed to cower without physically moving, which Harry thought was a major accomplishment. At the same time, he was marveling. He knew his parents were married, the Dursleys had said so, but to hear it confirmed was wonderful, and they had loved each other, and they had loved him. The goddess of family love had said so. With Zeus silent, Hera turned back to Harry. "You have nothing to fear from me, young Harry. As I said, for once there's a proper demigod." Harry smiled tentatively. Miss Hera? Do you know anything more about my parents? They died when I was very little, and they only said my parents died in a car crash." Hera could read between the lines, and her eyes tightened. "Unfortunately, Harry, my domain extends only to family love and marriage. I can tell your parents were married, and I can tell they loved you and each other, as that falls within the bonds of familiar love, but I can't tell you more." "Oh," Harry said, feeling rather disappointed. He offered the goddess a smile regardless. "Thank you anyway, I'm glad they loved me." There were some mutters from the other gods that were cut off rather sharply when Hera shifted her looks from him to them. When the room was silent, she focused on Harry again. "Never doubt that, Harry, the Queen of the Gods guarantees it." He smiled back. "Thank you, Miss Hera." Hestia was smiling. "I am glad to see that your normal animosity towards demigods doesn't extend towards Harry," she told her younger sister. Hera actually seemed to pout, although Harry was sure she'd deny it later. "I'm not that bad, sister." Hestia just kept smiling. "Of course not, sister," she said, although her tone belied her words. Harry looked from one to the other, and he was sure Hera was pouting at Hestia. "Come, Harry, I'll introduce you to my second brother," the goddess of the hearth said, leading Harry to a man seated on a fisherman's chair. He had jet black hair and sea green eyes, and looked like he smiled and laughed a lot. "Harry, this is my middle brother, Poseidon, god of the seas, and father of horses. Poseidon, this is Harry Potter." Harry suddenly felt very out of place. "All of the seas?" he wondered, feeling nervousness creep upon him. Hestia laughed gently. "Yes, Harry, every sea and every ocean," she confirmed. "There's no reason to be nervous. Poseidon has calmed down substantially from the tales you read." The boy looked up at the god, who was smiling gently, and did indeed look welcoming. "Hi Mr. Poseidon," Harry said, trying to muster his strength. "I've stayed away from your seas, I promise." Poseidon blinked. Hestia froze, suddenly realizing that she was going to have to restrain her temper again. "What do you mean, Harry?" Poseidon asked, abruptly looking rather intense. Harry could smell something salty in the air. It smelled nice. He'd never smelled it before. They told me that I would poison the sea if I got near it, so they left me behind when they went to the coast," Harry said, timidly. "I don't mean to poison your seas, Mr. Poseidon, I promise." Suddenly Harry felt very small, and Poseidon felt very large. The air got thick to breathe. The god before him drew a deep breath and seemed to calm himself down. "Harry," he said, firmly yet gently, "there is nothing about you that would poison the ocean. Everyone who respects it is welcome to enjoy its bounties. I would like to know who told you those lies." Hestia placed a calm hand on Harry's shoulder, who seemed to be unable to believe what he was hearing. "Harry, what have I told you about listening to what those horrid people have told you not to?" Harry offered. Hestia gently squeezed his shoulder. "So why are you listening to them?" she asked, still offering gentle support. Harry shrugged. "I just didn't want to mess up Mr. Poseidon's oceans. I heard lots of good things about them." "The oceans are great," Poseidon interjected as if it were the whole truth of existence. "When we are done here, I'll take you to some of my favorite beaches, and show you the bounty of the sea." Harry looked like Christmas had come, and ignored how some gods were muttering about bragging. "Really, Mr. Poseidon? That'd be great. I've never seen a beach." He suddenly shrunk down. "I don't know how to swim, though." Poseidon waved it off. "As god of the seas, I have my ways of teaching people to swim," he said with a wide smile. He looked at Hestia. "I would still like to know who told such horrible lies," he told her. "Harry's previous caretakers were not suitable." Hestia said, "Don't worry, the situation is taken care of." Poseidon, and quite a few of the other gods, were looking at her curiously. Hestia did not elaborate. "If you say so, sister," the god of the sea finally admitted. "I do," Hestia said firmly, yet gently. There were more curious looks from the others, but she remained silent on the subject. Instead, she nodded gratefully to Poseidon, and guided Harry away. "Harry, this is my middle sister, Demeter." She introduced Harry to a pretty goddess with golden hair and brown eyes. Demeter is goddess of agriculture, fertility, and the harvest. Looking at her sister, Hestia continued, "Demeter, this is Harry Potter." "Whoa," Harry said, sounding impressed. "Nice to meet you, Miss Demeter." Demeter smiled back at the little boy, who so far had been either entertaining or respectful. "Hello, Harry, are you the goddess of gardens too?" Harry asked. They made me tend to their garden. I didn't like weeding much, but I liked how pretty the roses were." Demeter smiled gently at the boy. "Every plant has its purpose, Harry," she explained gently. "While weeds, as you call them, may not appear helpful, they do put new food into the ground for other plants to absorb, and I agree with you, roses can be very pretty when tended well." Harry smiled. He liked the goddess of agriculture. Hestia guided him on. She seemed reluctant to introduce him to the next god, and Harry was wondering why. So far, he'd liked the gods and goddesses she has introduced him to. Well, he had liked all except Mr. Zeus, who cheated on his wife with a woman that wasn't even as pretty as her. "Harry, this is Ares, god of war." "Ares, this is Harry Potter," Hestia said as they stopped in front of the throne. The god seated upon it was huge and muscular, dressed in a leather duster, a red muscle shirt underneath a bulletproof vest. He had jet black hair and his eyes were balls of fire. "Hello, Mr. Ares," Harry said, politely. The god made him feel like Uncle Vernon did in the past, as if the slightest spark could set him off. "What's up, brat?" the god greeted back. "No need for all the politeness with me," he grinned. "Gets in the way of bloodshed." Harry blinked and hesitated for a moment. "Hestia told me to be polite," he finally said, ignoring the comment about bloodshed. Leaning closer to the god of war, he added, "It's very hard and I don't like it either." Ares burst out laughing. "I like this brat," he announced. Looking closer at Harry, he said, "You could use some more training. You're scrawny." Harry nodded. "They didn't feed me much and kept me locked in my cupboard a lot of the time. Hestia's been taking good care of me, and Artie's been teaching me to use knives and bows and stuff." Ares laughed loudly again. "You get away with calling the goddess of the hunt Artie?" He looked at one of the goddesses. "Getting soft, are we, Ares?" Hestia admonished. The god of war subsided. "Sorry, Aunt Hestia." He turned to Harry. "Look me up. I'll give you some training to put some muscles on those bones." "Sure, I love learning," Harry said, enthusiastically. As Ares laughed again, Hestia turned to him. "Come, Harry, let me introduce you to Apollo." She showed him to the next god on the male side, a god dressed in shiny gold, seated upon a golden throne. "Harry, this is Apollo, god of light, the sun, healing, music, art, poetry, archery, reason, knowledge, and prophecy." "Apollo, this is Harry Potter," Hestia introduced them. Harry smiled up at the blindingly dressed god, remembering how he had been the one to heal him earlier. "Hi, Mr. Apollo, thanks for healing me." "You're quite welcome, Harry," the god said, grinning widely. His teeth were so white they shone, and Harry had to squint to get a good look at him. "Perhaps a haiku is in order," Let's see. No. The other gods and goddesses interrupted, causing Harry to jump at the unexpected loud noise. He didn't do well with shouting and screaming, and his earlier panic attack had only made things worse. Apollo seemed to dim, and pouted at the others. "You're all so mean," he complained. Harry didn't know what a haiku was, but if it caused the other gods to protest, it must be something truly awful. Still, the god in front of him had healed him, and Harry hated seeing him down. He took a few steps, and patted the god on the knee. Just like the other gods, it was the highest part he could reach when they were seated down in their 3-meter-tall forms. "It's all right, Mr. Apollo, maybe later?" the little boy offered, trying to cheer him up. Some light seemed to seep back into the depressed god, while muttered protests sounded from around the room. Before the sun god could say anything, Harry went on to say, "Hestia said you have a lot of jobs to do, so I hope you're not too busy." Apollo grinned at the little boy, light shining off those shiny white teeth again. "Lots of work for me. I am a busy god." "You're fun, Harry," the other gods groaned, while Harry just looked confused. The last part seemed a good thing. The god liked him, and the first 2 sentences said he was very busy, but he didn't understand what the god was trying to say at all. "You're missing a syllable in the second sentence. You only have 6 instead or 7, and all the goddesses pointed out, making Apollo dim again. When Harry looked at the goddess that had spoken, he noticed an air intense gray eyes. He made to say something, defend the god that had healed him, when he was interrupted. "Don't worry, Harry," Hestia said. "He's been obsessed with haikus ever since he visited Japan." Harry nodded gravely, the way he always did when he didn't completely understand but was willing to go along with whatever she said. "Why are you all hating on my haikus?" Apollo complained. "Because they're awful," another goddess replied. This one was dressed in silver, and looked like what Harry imaged Artie's mom would look like. He wondered if they were related. Perhaps this really was Artie's mom. Apollo dimmed again, and Harry wondered if he should pat the god on the knee again to try and cheer him up. Hestia beat him to it. There, Apollo," Hestia said with a small smile. "Practice makes perfect. I'm sure you'll write some wonderful haikus once you get the rhythm down. It's a Japanese practice, and us Greek gods are bound to have issues learning the skill." Apollo seemed to light up again, and Harry wondered if that was normal. The gods seemed to dim and light up at the drop of a hat. "Come, Harry, I'll introduce you to another nephew of mine. He's called Hermes," Hestia said, smiling at seeing the sun god's mood restored. They walked over to the next god on the male side of the large meeting room, and Harry gave the man a small, tentative smile. He got a big one from the god in return, making him feel better. He still somewhat felt bad about Mr. Apollo being teased by the others, but the smile from Mr. Hermes made him feel better. "Harry, this is Hermes, the messenger of the gods. He's the god of roads, messengers, and travelers. That's why his cabin at camp welcomes everyone," Hestia introduced. "Hermes, this is Harry Potter." "Hello Harry," Hermes greeted kindly. He knew how overwhelming things could be, and as god of travelers, he was used to both making nice with people, and putting people at ease. "Hello Mr. Hermes, it's very nice of you to let everyone into your cabin at camp," Harry said, smiling. "Yes, it is, isn't it?" Hermes said, putting on an exaggerated air. Harry laughed softly, still unsure whether he was even allowed to laugh or not. "Hermes is also the god of thieves," Hestia added. Harry looked at her, as if asking if she were joking or not. She smiled softly at him, letting him know it was not a joke. Harry turned to look at Hermes. Then, he remembered having to steal in order to feed himself. He didn't like remembering those episodes. He felt ashamed of them, but he was well aware that this cozy life on Olympus could fall apart at any moment, and he would have to go back to taking care of himself. And when that happened, he may need to steal again. "Do you look over all thieves?" Harry asked quietly. Most mortals wouldn't have understood him, but this was a hall filled with gods. They heard him perfectly fine. Hermes grinned in a conspiring manner. "Not personally, but I am aware of them," he said. The young boy nodded. "Thanks, Mr. Hermes," he offered. There were some mutters from the surrounding gods. Hermes narrowed his eyes at the others. Harry's shoulder sunk. "After they left me in New York, I needed food," he muttered quietly. The mutterings from the other gods turned on a dime. Hestia, hoping to break the dark mood, said, "Being the messenger of the gods, Hermes is also responsible for handling mail, so if you ever need something sent, you can box it up, put the delivery address on it, and offer some gold, and Hermes will deliver it." Hermes frowned. "And I have my hands full with it, let me tell you," he griped. Harry smiled tentatively, not sure whether the god was playing or not. Hermes grinned down at the little boy. "Instant delivery, too. You can't beat Hermes' mail." Harry grinned back. Mr. Hermes seemed like a good guy, a bit like Mr. Apollo. He seemed rather laid back. "That sounds like a lot of work," Harry said, smiling up at the god. Hermes grunted. "Don't get me started, I don't get a second to myself," he complained. Hestia, seeing how the busy god was about to start a rant on how busy he was, quickly guided Harry away. "Harry, this is Hephaestus," she introduced. "He's the god of forges, fire, technology, craftsmen, sculptors, volcanoes, and blacksmiths." "Hephaestus, this is Harry Potter." Harry looked up at the powerfully built god, noticing the powerful muscles and the calloused hands of a craftsman, yet completely ignoring the god's lame leg and malformed face. "Are you really the god of blacksmiths?" the little boy asked, suddenly sounding excited. "Like forging weapons and armor and such?" Hephaestus, halfway resigned to a comment about his appearance, grinned as the boy spoke. "All of that and more, young Harry," he said, grin widening. "Hephaestus also builds a lot of machines and other devices," Hestia supplied, sounding proud. "He's the greatest inventor on Olympus." "Whoa," Harry said, impressed. "That's awesome. Can you build robots and stuff, too? Like Robocop or Terminator?" Hephaestus grinned. "They're called automatons, and I've built plenty of them." Robocop would need a mortal. He was interrupted by Zeus growling his name. Hephaestus went on as if his father hadn't spoken. "Unfortunately, we're not allowed to interfere in mortal lives, so that's out. And while I could build a Terminator, the way it can hide would wreak havoc with mortals. Too dangerous without a way to experiment safely." "Whoa," Harry said again, "but still, pounding metal on an anvil is cool." He grinned, and pointed at the god. "You're my favorite god so far." There were complaints from the other male gods, and Harry suddenly shrunk in on himself. He'd let his mouth get away from him, and now the others were going to be mad at him. He wished he hadn't said anything. Hestia gave the other male gods a look, making them retreat into silence, although it wasn't heartfelt. Hephaestus, meanwhile, grinned. "Not a lot of people recognize the value of hard work these days. I'm glad to meet you, young Harry." Harry gave the god a tentative smile, and gave a somewhat abashed look to the other male gods he had already met. It wasn't returned. He sighed sadly. He'd liked the other gods, too, but blacksmithing, and robots, now, Hestia said, everyone was favorites. "There's no need for hurt feelings." The others grumbled slightly, but seemed to subside in their anger. "Good," the goddess of the heart said, her trademark smile back in place. "Come, Harry, let me introduce you to my oldest brother." Harry gave another smile and waved to Hephaestus, and followed Hestia to the last throne on the male side of the room. He had deep black hair and equally black eyes, and as he sat up straight on his throne, which seemed temporary for some reason, he also seemed resigned about something. "Harry, this is my oldest brother, Hades. He's the ruler of the underworld, and god of the dead and riches." "Hades, this is Harry Potter." Harry stared at the god for a few moments. "That's so cool," he finally said. The god in question looked surprised. Harry went on, "The underworld sounds like something out a James Bond movie." "It's awesome." Hades, still looking surprised, finally answered, "Thank you, Harry. Since you're god of the dead, Mr. Hades, Does that mean you're god of zombies, skeletons, and ghosts, too? Hades nodded. Yes, I am, he replied, surprised. Harry turned to Hestia, smiling widely. Awesome. Hestia shook her head gently. Harry was a young boy, and like most young boys, he loved zombies and skeletons. Harry didn't notice her shaking her head, and he turned back to the dark god. How does it work, Mr. Hades? When someone dies, do you bring them with you? Oh, and what about heaven and hell? Are they real? Hades smiled slightly, as if he weren't used to Harry's questions. I have a god working for me who transports the spirits of the dead. His name is Charon. Harry nodded. He's a centaur, right? Hades laughed, as did plenty of other deities in the room. That's a common mistake, Harry, Hades said. It annoys Charon to no end. Please feel free to remind him to his face should you ever see him. Hades, Hestia warned. Sorry, Hestia, the god of the underworld replied. No, Harry, Charon is not a centaur. Chiron is the centaur you're thinking of. He's working at camp as a trainer. Charon is the bargeman. He collects the deceased spirits, and ferries them across the river Styx into the underworld. The spirit is then judged, based on the actions they have taken in their life. Good people go to the Elysian fields, heaven, so to speak. The average people go to the asphodel fields. Bad people are punished. He hesitated at seeing Hestia's warning look. Harry just nodded. That sounds cool, he said. So you're basically taking care of people after they die? Make sure they're rewarded or punished, and make sure they're alright? Hades hesitated for a moment, then nodded. That's an adequate description, he allowed. That's so cool, Harry repeated again. Thanks for taking care of my mom and dad, Mr. Hades. The god seemed surprised again. Harry thought that it was because not a lot of people would think about thanking him for taking care of their dead loved ones, which is really sad, because it sounded like an important job. You're welcome, Hades allowed, trying to wrap his head around the fact that he was actually being thanked for once. He had expected either fear or condemnation, not gratitude. Say, Mr. Hades, when you say you punish bad spirits, what do you do? I mean, spirits are like ghosts, right? It's kinda hard to do anything to them, unless you're the Ghostbusters. Hades gave another short laugh. Being a god, I can touch them just fine, and after they have been judged, they take on some form of physical body, so to speak, so they can be punished extensively, depending on their crimes. Harry nodded. So bad people that get away with things here get punished after they die? Hades grinned. It was not a nice grin. In fact, it was a rather bloodthirsty grin. Exactly, Harry, the god said.